poor little Pluto is no longer considered to be a planet. While we had a space probe on the way out to take this great picture of Pluto so we could finally see what it looked like, we were discovering other objects that were out there at the edge of the solar system called Kuiper Belt objects now. And those objects seem to have properties that Pluto had more things in common with than the planets that we've been talking about. For example, I've just been talking about the gas giants, saying they're huge balls of gas. But now that we move out to where Pluto is, I'm not saying huge ball of gas anymore. Pluto is a ball of ice and rock, as you can see in this photograph where you actually get to see its surface. If this was a gas giant, I couldn't see the surface. I'd be looking at all gas. So suddenly things are different when we get out to where Pluto is. Pluto does have a thin methane atmosphere, very similar to terrestrial planets. When you look at something like Pluto, you mostly see the rocky surface of the planet. The thin atmosphere doesn't show up as well in the picture because it is thin compared to the size of the planet. Pluto was discovered in 1930, and that made everybody all excited that we had found a ninth planet in the solar system. Until modern times, when we're looking further out there and have discovered other things out there called the Kuiper Belt objects, and Pluto just has more in common with them than it does with the other planets of the solar system. Now, Pluto also has 5 moons, though. Even though it's not a planet, you're still allowed to have moons and not be a planet. Charon was discovered in 1978, a relatively large moon compared to the size of its planet. And with Charon and Pluto, their brightness combined together make it harder to see that there are other moons out there too. So taking a special photograph that dims down the light of Pluto and Charon, now we were able to discover in more modern times that Hydra and Nix are out there orbiting Pluto. Kerberos was discovered in 2011, and Styx was discovered in 2012, and they just called Styx P5 and Kerberos P4 until they came up with these official names. This diagram is showing us what the orbits of the planets would look like if we were drawing them all out and trying to show how the tilts of the orbits compared to each other. If we could take our solar system and place it on top of a table so that Earth's orbit sits flat on the table, we would see that all of the other planets have a little bit of a tilt to their orbits so that they don't sit perfectly flat on the table like Earth does. But none of them are as extreme as the orbit of Pluto, which swings way up above the solar system and back down below it, so that its orbit makes an angle of 17 degrees. This is much more of a tilt than any other planet has. Another indication that Pluto isn't quite doing the same thing as what the planets are doing in our solar system. Pluto is different. This is another difference in its orbit. Remember, we've talked about the fact that the orbits are elliptical, but they were hard to detect as elliptical because they were so close to circles, and it fooled people into thinking they were circles for the longest time. They are elliptical orbits like the orbit of Neptune, but that looks very circular in this diagram. The orbit of Pluto is a much more stretched out ellipse compared to the other planets of the solar system. And the stretch of its ellipse brings it in close to the sun for a 20-year period where it actually is closer to the sun than Neptune is. So the last time this happened was 1979 to 1999, a time when we still considered Pluto to be a planet. And so for that period of time, Pluto was actually the 8th planet from the sun, and Neptune was the 9th planet until 1999, when Neptune was closer and went back to being the 8th planet, and Pluto started swinging out and away from the sun and became not even a planet anymore.